Hi everyone and welcome to the Economic Link. This time we're going to look at inflation. Inflation is one of those counterintuitive concepts. Why would you want stuff to get more expensive? The counterintuitive nature of the concept comes from the idea that we want everything to stay as it is. But in the current setup of the economy, global, national, you take your pick, to keep growing, the economy needs to keep growing. Whether it's more people to buy your stuff, better distribution, cheaper materials, the economy has to grow. It's one of those key assumptions that you just have to believe, and without which our whole world just doesn't work. But prices rise over time, supply and demand, sure. That's the basic foundation, but a big part of it is also more people need more land. Means whoever owns the land can charge more simply because they've got multiple offers and BAM! Everyone from small shops to multinationals pay more for their buildings, rent, leases, and headquarters. Which of course gets chopped up into many small bits, and that cost gets slapped on top of the bill of materials and labor for the final product, and there you go. Abracadabra, prices go up, and 9 months later, a baby is born. And that baby's name is inflation. And that, kids, is how babies are made. Inflation is the shorthand by which we refer to increasing prices, usually some index called a CPI, a Consumer Price Index. This gets calculated by the Office of National Statistics in the UK, by the National Bank in Colombia, the BPS in Indonesia, and the Central European Bank in the Eurozone. Usually it's either the central bank or the National Statistics Institute. And they work it out according to different guidelines. Some countries, they exclude housing. In the UK in particular, housing prices were increasing massively for the past decade to the point that there was a crisis of affordability. So counting that would have obviously skewed the numbers. But then there's also fuel. Some countries subsidize it, so again that skews the data. To give you an indication of some countries' inflation in 2017, in the US, it was 2.1%, while in Greece it was 1.12%. In India, 1.97%, while in Brazil it was 3.46% year on year. Historically, faster growing countries had higher inflation. They were said to have higher tolerance. Because when your economy is growing, wages are growing too. This means that there is more to spend on the same goods, again, which pushes those prices higher up still. There's a lot to be said about inflation, but let's focus mainly on what happens when inflation is too high and when it is too low, or when prices are decreasing. Of course, too high or too low is pretty arbitrary, given the right amount, quote unquote, of inflation is around 2 or 3% in most developed countries, with some tolerance, say another percent higher or lower. Right, so we have a couple of examples of hyperinflation in the 20th century, and the most well-known two are probably Weimar Germany and Zimbabwe. In Germany, when partly due to war reparations after World War I and the ensuing scarcity, but also due to monetary hocus pocus from the central bank, the currency became worthless. But then it became more worthless, and again more worthless, and so on every day. The story is to convey the spirit of the times that people would go with an actual wheelbarrow full of cash to the stores to buy bread or some other staple, and having to leave it outside. They'd come back to find thieves had taken the wheelbarrow, but left the money. Or that price tags were long sheets of paper so that prices could change from 1 million to 2 million marks by the end of the day. Crazy times. The other example is Zimbabwe, where one could very easily be a trillionaire or beyond. Several attempts were made to rebalance the currency, but with currencies, if they're all talk and no hard asset to back it up, rebalancing it is meaningless. In fact, I believe people have resorted to using black market currency, South African rands, in place of their own currency due to the stability of the former. If you want more examples of this, there's plenty, usually around times of war or recovery, natural catastrophe or disaster. You've got Hungary in the 50s, which I believe is the highest hyperinflation ever. Russia in the 90s, the US Civil War, and the Revolutionary War too. There's that old expression about not being worth a continental. But what about deflation? Mind you, not disinflation. Disinflation is when inflation slows down and prices grow slower. But deflation is when prices drop. Sure, we all like a good sale and prices lower, but the problem is when they stay low. How is a business going to pay its workers if it's making less money than it did before? And if the workers get paid less, they're going to spend less, which affects other businesses, and so on, which means less money for everybody. And those two aspects are why central banks these days manage inflation through interest rates. I won't go into that mechanism right now, maybe another video. Comment down below if you want to hear more about that. But managing inflation, or at least keeping it at a moderate level, is a bit like clipping your nails. Sure, you might have done a really good job this time, but they'll grow back and you'll have to do it again and again. And oh boy, if you screw it just one time, I feel bad for you. So inflation's a bit of a compromise between prices going up, so the economy has some sort of foundation to grow, but not too fast, or you're spending half your salary on bread alone. And prices staying stable, so you know what to expect the next day or month. So that's a quick summary of how inflation works, where it comes from, and potentially what happens when you have a bit too much of it or too little of it. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video, leave a thumbs up below, comment with your opinion, and if you love this kind of content, please do subscribe, it really helps out the channel. See you next time, ciao.